Hi, everybody. Welcome to the August 10th Tinderbox Meetup. I'm super excited to have you all here. Typically the way we run these meetups and forums, first and foremost, we start with the purpose. The purpose is to talk about not just the tools Tinderbox, but tools for thought, knowledge management. I tend to call it the 5 C's of knowledge management. How do we curate, how do we collect, curate, create, collaborate, and then ultimately contribute our knowledge within these tools for thought. If we have a theme, we would jump right into that. Today we don't have a theme. We typically go around the room and see what projects people are working on and see if they need any help or ideas with those projects, or otherwise we just jump in and have an active discussion on different topics and things about the Tinderbox tool and how we can go about managing our knowledge. So with that in mind, let's jump right in. I don't see anybody new today. So, gentlemen, what would you like to discuss? Does anybody have an agenda topic or item that they want to discuss or project they're working on? Anyone? If not, we can tease apart elements from the personal information management system, aka resume building project I did a couple weeks ago, and we can look at the underpinnings of that. We could also look at some code that I've been recently writing around leveraging regex to for the book chapter I'm working and writing on. We could also and look to experiment and try to solve in real time some of the other questions or issues I have, but that might be a bit challenging because I don't think I even know the answer, nor does Mr. Mark Anderson. We'll probably have to take some of that stuff offline as we figure it out. So what's going on? What projects are you all working on?
I don't have a topic. I don't have a project, but something for today or maybe some future project. I've come to understand that people use Tinderbox in many different ways, but often because of the tasks that they're trying to complete, they use Tinderbox with other applications, other tools, and often the use of Tinderbox and what they spend their time sort of configuring within Tinderbox depends on the other tools that they're using. Now, it's both the task they're trying to complete, but also the tools that are sort of in the ecosystem of Tinderbox. And I, at some point, like to hear what other people use in terms of other software or other things that they use to complement. It might be something before they put things into Tinderbox, or while they're using Tinderbox, or after. Michael, you've mentioned a number of different tools for getting from Tinderbox to Microsoft Word as an example, and the tools that you use. I just think it would be interesting sharing those kinds of things. Or somebody might say, I don't use any other tools. I just use what's available in Tinderbox, and
Yeah,
that's an
yeah.
alternative.
Well, and again, I think that's a great topic, and I would love to dig into that today if you want. And I can also show a couple of little 10 minutes in Tinderbox demos as well. But I think that's a really important topic, and I do think there are some people, Steve, that just use Tinderbox and throw stuff in Tinderbox. But I also believe that those people that are doing that, not to be pejorative with them, they're not using the tool they're not using the tool to the great extent that and the power to which it can be bringing to their lives. If you use it just as a standalone island, you can get a tremendous amount of value out of it, but I don't think you're unleashing its full potential if you only use it in that capacity. Getting stuff into Tinderbox through automation, getting stuff out of Tinderbox through manual, getting stuff in through manual and automated activities, getting stuff out through automated and manual activities. I think all of those things are incredibly important and really what make Tinderbox special. So
Do others on the call feel that that's something of interest? Michael, you voted.
Yeah, I'd like to chime in. Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. The purpose of Tinderbox, trying to get into the purpose of what you're trying to do and use Tinderbox and the tooling is very important. Definitely for me, like Pandoc, trying to get into Pandoc, but I always feel a little self-conscious because there's so many videos out there that Michael's created that I got to go back to the videos. And I don't want to take time to this form to say, well, how do you do printing on Pandoc? But yeah, so there's tons of information out there that Michael has provided and others that we can definitely get into those toolings. But for today, for me, just I'm trying to learn. I'm still somewhat of a beginner Tinderbox user, just using Pandoc, how to actually export out not just HTML, but export out maybe to like the PDF and whatever a PowerPoint. I mean, that's pretty basic stuff. So I don't want to bore people. That would be my feedback. The tooling's important, but you have to look at the videos. Maybe today we can get into it. I totally agree with you, Steve. A lot of tools out there.
Yeah, and let me comment on that one. Mark Anderson mentioned this a few weeks ago, and I think it's important. He said the word just. And you kind of were, and Kim, you just suggested, some of this is pretty simple. And I think simple and just is contextual, right? So for some things, if once you've done it enough, it seems simple or it seems just, but if you've never seen it before, it's impossible, right? And so there's this broad
Right.
spectrum between simple and impossible. And so, yeah, and again, I think that's part of the challenge of this tool is, you can enter it in from any place, but you're coming with it with your prior experience and your prior knowledge. And because of that, some things are simple for you and other things are impossible, and those things could be completely different for somebody else. So I just really want to encourage people as they listen to these videos, as they talk about it, if it's hard for you, that is okay. And there's no reason why it's okay. It just is. I've been doing yoga off and on for my entire life, and I still can't touch my toes. Doesn't make me a bad person. It just means I can't touch my toes. Same thing with Tinderbox. So I think there's a whole suite of tools to think about it. And like exporting to PDF out of Pandoc, I've still yet to figure that out. Right? Because PDF is just a weird beast. I mean, it's a different type of tool. And then going back to Steve's point earlier, what I found recently too, and Bruce Gale does this a lot as well. Like, it also depends on your, and I think Kim, you just brought about it too. It's like what job is to be done. What's your workflow, and also like how much money and time do you have? And ignoring the idea of money, it's really your job and workflow. And if you've got 20 minutes to get something done and you don't know how to do it in Tinderbox or with a set of tools, and then do it with whatever you have available to get it done, right? And at the end of the day, the most important thing is the job, not the tool, right? So if you've got a few minutes to get it done, then just get it done. But then if you can afford it to, at some point, teach yourself how to use the tool, you've got the time to figure it out, so you can build a process that you then can repurpose and reuse down the road in the future. Give yourself that time. And then the last comment before I keep prattling on is, you mentioned this point of like, embarrassed to ask the question, or, I should know to go watch that video. Well, sometimes you just can't. So just ask the question again, even if you know there's a video out there.
It's me. I'm self-conscious.
No, I know. But my point being on that is, I think you're not alone with that. And that's why I mentioned that a lot of people are
right
into it sometimes too. But what I've learned is just ask, or if you don't have the time to watch the video, just ask. If you do have the time to watch the video, watch it. More often than not, I've created a few hundred of these videos and I forget that I've done it. And so then I have to, I don't even know where it is. So then I have to, I either ask or I look for it. So I think there's, that's the wonderful aspect of this community. So Pandoc is a tool that is clearly we are using, and the purpose of that tool is for text transformation. Basically, it's a command line utility that enables you to import text into it and export something out. and that, so you can take like HTML files and outcomes, a Word file, a PowerPoint file, or a PowerPoint file. So that's an interesting tool that's on the plate. Does anybody else, it looks like Frederick's contributing some language there. Yeah, no, there is a list of tutorials too. But even then, within those list of tutorials, Frederick, I've been struggling with the fact that, you know, there's hours and hours and hours of videos in there. And even within those videos, there are tips and tricks that are indexed. There are whole videos that are not even named properly or labeled. So there's just a lot in there that someday we'll be able to get out.
I would just add one small addition, and that is what's available out there keeps changing. The capabilities of the existing tools that you might be using keep moving forward with new features, and there are new tools on the horizon. So maybe it's Pandoc in 2024, but in 2025, perhaps there's a tool which is less complicated and requires less of a learning curve in order to use. That's why I think having a discussion of what people are using and maybe some things that people have discovered recently might help the whole group about.
Yeah. So Frederick's got his hand up.
Yeah, Michael, I just want to say it's awesome what you've done with all these tutorials, and they're really great. And I finally decided, I should actually look at some of them. And so I made a list and I'm going through them in order. And it is awesome because each one, even the very early ones, number 2, they've got stuff I don't know, and it's just opening my eyes to what I can do. And you've broken it down really nicely into small chunks. I don't know what happens later, but so far, this has been really a super way. So I recommend anyone at least go there because they're short and they're really good. And, I go to these meetups and you zip through stuff, and I just need to watch the tutorials and then I'll be able to keep up.
Yeah,
So
thank you.
Exactly.
On that note, and actually Frederick had a great thing on the forum this week. And so if we can actually do a demonstrate, let's go back and forth and talking about Steve's question about tools and Frederick's and actually using Tinderbox too. But Frederick, you had a really interesting conversation earlier this week about exploding notes, and aligning and linking and linking notes. And so maybe we could demonstrate that for everyone briefly as well, so we can actually be showing a practical example of where some of this comes in.
Yeah, I didn't work through your response, but thank you. But it seemed a natural next step to the tutorial.
Yeah. So we can jump into that if we have some more time, but let's stay on the tools for thought bandwagon a little bit. Maybe let's go around the room and could each of us, and I'll go last because I have a tendency to showboat. Let's go around the room, and can each of us say 3 to 5 tools that we use for our tools for thought, independent of whether or not we're using them with Tinderbox or not? What are the tools we use to manage our information in our lives? And since Steve brought this up, let's start with Steve.
Okay. So I certainly use Tinderbox to cogitate on various topics and sort of think through how I want to organize. Often I work 100% remote, so often it's in anticipation of a call which I'm leading about various and sundry IT topics. But I often go and use PowerPoint as a means of sort of segmenting and sort of thinking through the order of presentation and sort of building the story, as it were. And I don't connect Tinderbox to PowerPoint. They're both kind of on peers in my head of just trying to think through things, and I frankly wouldn't think that I would gain much efficiency of connecting the two. The other thing that I use, which is pretty pedestrian, I'd say, is Outlook. And the one thing that I do is I put my all of my to-dos into Tinderbox. And what I do is I drag and drop those things that are in my Outlook calendar, which are all of my work to-dos, into Tinderbox, into a week by week kind of setup in Tinderbox, and it creates a note, and then I have a small bit of automation that sort of teases apart what has just been dropped into there and put it into a form that I find useful. The other thing I use is there's for visual understanding, I use a product called YED, which is a free desktop computer app. You could pay for licenses to do all sorts of things to enhance your own applications, but it's a standalone tool that allows me to, often it's to communicate an understanding of something, but also helps me to think through some very complex, often data structure kinds of and process kinds of things. That's pretty much my suite of things. I do all sorts of analysis in Excel.
So I'm looking at YED, and it looks like it's like a Visio type tool, a flow charting type tool. Is that right?
It is. It has a bunch of I'm trying to grasp a word. It basically, you place items and the connectors on your canvas, and then you can use various algorithms to orient those. So there's like a hierarchy.
Yeah. It's called, it's referring to itself as a graph editor.
Yeah.
So that's good. And
you can go through a whole lot of different, taking basically the same information, and graphically it orients it in a variety of different ways, and often I see interesting patterns emerge out of that.
Yeah, it's interesting when I look at this tool briefly, there's a concept that I've been asking for Mark for a while, what I call flattened map view, but that we can come to that later. Yeah, interesting. So that's a new one for me. So what I heard from you then is your jobs to be done are essentially building story / narrative, thinking through things, task management, and visual associations with thoughts and ideas.
Yeah, I would supplement that with, I'm classically a business analyst. So I take what I heard and I throw it back to the business users and say, this is what I think you're talking about and how things actually work in your world.
Okay. So building story, narrative, thinking through things, task management, visual association with thoughts and ideas, ultimately take what I hear there and throw it back to the business user to align on those points. That's kind of what you're doing. So business end. Okay. And the tools I heard you say were Tinderbox, PowerPoint, Outlook, and YED. All right. Who wants to go next? Mr. Chuck, how about you? You're on mute.
Yep. No, I have to get off mute. I would, first of all, just comment that if I had to do things in PowerPoint, I think I'd slip my wrists anymore. Just had it with PowerPoint. Not that I haven't spent untold hours with it, but it's not where my mind is at this point. But like Steve, I find email, I've said this before on this forum, I find email to still be one of my most useful tools. And it's not just for correspondence, although that's what I largely use it for, but because it's been such a great place to capture notes And it's, if I had to say, what is my go-to tool for notes, it is email. And as I mentioned,
when you say email, though, that's not the same thing as Outlook. I mean, it is, but it's not. Do you have actually an email? When you
yes, but I would also note that while I use Thunderbird instead of Outlook, Thunderbird has a calendar, which I tie into on occasion, has contacts. It keeps to-dos and reminders, which historically I've used, although I'm sort of switching over to using Apple's reminders tool and so forth. But the other reason why email has been so useful is because it just keeps track of things. It makes it immediate to share some thoughts with other people and get their responses. And all of that gets captured. And so it's so much more than just my thoughts. It's, it's representative of the community I've interacted with over decades at this point, at least 3 decades. The other thing that's significant with email that I think is increasingly important these days, although I am depressed at how poor tools are, is that because I digitally sign all of my emails, I have a irrefutable record of what I've done, what I've said. If somebody said, you didn't really have that concept back in such and such a year, I can say, well, here's a signed email. It was sent to these other people. They received it as a signed email. It would be very difficult for somebody to tamper with that and prove otherwise.
by the way, a little side note,
like
how are you signing email? What's your method for that? What's your method for signing email? I've never really figured that out.
Okay, I use SMIME. You can also use PGP. Outlook supports SMIME. I don't know if it supports PGP. There's probably some plugins somewhere.
Okay.
The problem with Outlook, though, is that it gets really bollocksed up with Microsoft's strange vision of how things should be done in an enterprise. And it's become increasingly difficult to get it to do basic things. And it was always much harder. Everybody I know who has switched from Outlook to almost any other email system has told me they'd never go back. And it's because there are a lot of things that are just very difficult. But to use signed email, all you need is a certificate. And unfortunately, that's another thing that the world tries to say that's only for certain people or that's only for certain capabilities. But if anybody wants to talk to me about it, I can tell you how to do it. You don't necessarily have to have an official certificate issued from some player like DigiCert or somebody like that. You can do it with something you generate on your own, with pluses and minuses. But the point is, email has this community aspect to it. It has a time trace aspect to it because I have all these things. It allows me to organize things into various categories of work, like client or by topic. It allows me to mix my personal life with my business life and yet keep them in separate folders, separate places. So I just mentioned that because, again, I think the history of it is what's important. And I don't see that going away in the future.
Can I pause you right there too, though? Just to add some context for people that might be listening to this. You're an independent contractor, correct? You work for
I'm an independent, I'm a consultant,
consultant, contractor, advisor. Let's lump it into this concept. You're independent. And I think what's important to realize with that, in my experience, like I am too, and I agree with everything you're saying there, except that I have this context, but that when I was working with one of my Fortune 500 clients, all of the value that you were referring to email almost fell apart with the way they managed their email.
Yeah.
Right. Every email had to be deleted within 6 months.
Yeah. Okay. So,
every email had to be controlled and confined and all of that. So it was different.
Yeah, that's a good point. I have my email records go back to when I was employed by an organization. And I have had to deal with some of the constraints that some of my clients have placed on things. But there again, I haven't, if it's sensitive material, I encrypt it. Which means to destroy records. All I have to do is just get rid of the keys that were used to decrypt them. I also have security in flight. So as the messages traverse the internet, they are secured. And when they arrive in my inbox, they stay encrypted. And if I don't have the certificate and the corresponding private key, I can't open them.
Yeah.
You know, those are just some comments. And I guess I mentioned that because I think these are elements of note-taking that everybody just sort of glosses over and forgets how important some of these points are. So what else do I use? I use Excel. I'd like to stop using Excel. And in fact, I'm sort of on a campaign to see if I can't get Tinderbox to replace Excel in my workflows and dealing with things. Because it's just Excel, for what I'm interested in and what I want to do, is become a burden. It is too hard to do certain simple things in Excel. And it's too easy to make mistakes. Other tools that I use on a regular basis, aside from calendaring and whatnot, I'm starting to use the Apple Notes app and Freeform a little bit more. I see some value there, but mostly for the very ad hoc type of thing that I'm out with all I have is my iPhone and I just want to capture a note. And what I find helpful there is, you know, I don't even have to use the keyboard. I can just transcribe it from what I say to the phone. So that ease of capture is important. But generally, if I use that, the note eventually winds up in some other place, whether it be Tinderbox or email or what have you. The other really important tool to me that I've used now for, I guess I could say it's 25 years, so a quarter century, is DevonTHINK. And that is just invaluable to the way I work. And so I have, again, a large record of things I've captured. So unlike note-taking, I use DevonTHINK for capturing the background material. I'm not producing papers that require a great deal of citation work, like you, Michael, and some other people. But I really like to have the original records of things. And one of the features that I like the most about DevonTHINK is it's always allowed me to not only capture a bookmark for a web page, but actually capture the page as a PDF, which means when that page goes away, when that company goes out of business, I still have the records. And again, a lot of notes go into DevonTHINK for where it ties into the way I've organized my material. So those are the tools that I would say I use the most. It doesn't mean that I don't have others, but those are the ones that I use the most.
Awesome. All right. So DevonTHINK, I'm just going to go through a list so we can capture the new ones. DevonTHINK, Apple Notes, Thunderbird. I thought Thunderbird went away.
Oh no.
I love Thunderbird. I just downloaded it because I'm going to.
Thunderbird goes back to the Mozilla communicator.
I know. Thunderbird
was circa 1995.
Yeah, Thunderbird. Okay, so DevonTHINK, Apple Notes, Thunderbird, Excel. I think those were the new ones you added, and then the encryption stuff, SMIME, PGP. Okay, awesome. Oh, yeah. Okay, who's next?
It's Frederick, I can go.
Go for it.
Let me just put my screen. Unlike Chuck, I'm beginning to think maybe I should just throw away everything I've ever collected and just start with what's left in my brain because it's a huge mess that I've got. I've got stuff in mail, I've got stuff in plain text files, I've got stuff in Word, everywhere. The job's to be done. So there's random notes. I'll read a book or I'll see something in the paper or there's something interesting. I think it's interesting. I make a note about it. And then I think maybe I can use these someday for something. But of course, I think I lose most of them. But it's just random thoughts. Then there's another area, which is organizing material, for example, working on security or trustworthiness. And it's a huge space with a lot of complexity and interacting parts. And it's useful to try to put some structure to it. And that's where I'm thinking Tinderbox will probably help the most. Then there's investing. where you read a 10K and you want to make notes from the 10K and maybe correlate it with other news items you've read about the company, industry trends, industry analysis, and so on. So managing investment knowledge is a third job to be done.
So you give me the first two. I didn't capture those. The first one.
The first one is random notes, just you're reading stuff. Your
And number two.
number two was organizing, let's say, technical material. Maybe you're writing a book or research on a topic like security. Let's say you want to try to get a global understanding of security. There's a lot of aspects to it. So you might want to structure that knowledge, but it's obviously can be structured in more than one way.
So collection and curation.
Yeah, like if you're looking at security, one aspect is authentication, another aspect is, so on.
And the next topic was investing.
Investing, managing information you gather relevant to investing.
Okay. And so those last two seem like the same thing. So organizing information for like a security report, organizing information for investing. So curating.
Pretty much, yeah. They're
Okay.
pretty much the same, except that something like security, there's obviously textbooks and a lot of literature. And so it could be more like finding research papers and analyzing them in time. Let me put it this way. In the security space, you could view it as having a deep understanding of the space with references to his existing research that's been done in the past and knowledge, and then trying to take that understanding and have new insights. Whereas investing, I think it's more about ferreting out useful information that might be relevant to making decisions.
Okay.
The tools, like I said, I have a mess. I use Mail a lot, MailMate, use Word and Excel, unfortunately, use Drafts and Apple Notes. They're different because one of them you can embed images and stuff, and Drafts doesn't really let you do that cleanly, so I wind up switching between the two. Plain text files, Bookends. For contacts and calendar, I use BusyCal and BusyContext, which are pretty good. Contacts, which are pretty good. Use Bookends for references. And then I've tried a lot of things over the years. I've tried DevonTHINK, and I think I have some mess in there. I don't know what I did, what to do with it, so I have to look at that again. Used to use Yojimbo, which I think is pretty much dead. Use 1Password.
What is Yojimbo?
It's a tool from the makers of, I think, BB Edit that used to be a tool for storing keyed notes where you could make notes and put in. It's sort of like 1Password, but not for security.
Okay.
But I think it's pretty much dead. It still exists, sort of. Maybe it's alive. I don't know. I used Aeon Timeline, but didn't get very far with that. Used a mind mapping tool, but I've even forgotten what the name is. I have to track it down. Textfiles. I really liked using Textfiles. There's a lot of people that believe that the only thing that will persist is Textfiles. As software changes, you can always read text. So I'm trying to go towards using Tinderbox. And right now I'm using Tinderbox, and then I'm using Drafts. One issue with Tinderbox is I don't think you can use it on all devices. So you got to get it. If you're not with your computer, you need to do something else to get the note taken quickly. And then I use Emacs too. Emacs for text and other things. For web publishing, I use Emacs. That's pretty much it.
Okay. And so one of the things I heard was this like collection included this idea of rapidly collecting notes within a context, right? So when you're out and about, the need to be able to just collect notes whenever, however, regardless of the platform. So that sounds like a need.
I'm using Drafts, but it isn't, I'm putting metadata of my own in there using the abbreviation mechanism they've got. So you say bang, bang, and you get a template that automatically fills in with the keywords, and then you put the stuff in there that goes in the keywords manually, and then eventually I hope to import it into Tinderbox, which I know you've done.
Can I, so I'm and this is not to be pejorative for Drafts, because I'm a huge Drafts fan as well. But about 4 or 5 months ago, I switched to Obsidian for the very same reason. And Tom Norris, before he had to drop out, just said he's an Obsidian user as well. And I demonstrated this a couple weeks back. Obsidian actually has a capability called prototypes, which are analogous to attributes. And because Obsidian works in individual markdown files, any and every note you create in Obsidian is easily and natively transportable back into Tinderbox. And you can then use stream parsing in Tinderbox to pull all of the values you put in those Obsidian attributes into Tinderbox prototypes. So it's like it's almost a perfect match. And the other beautiful thing about Obsidian is it works on all iOS devices. So your phone, your watch, your tablet. And so it's always with you, always able to capture notes, syncs between your computer and everything. It's just awesome.
Okay, so that way I wouldn't have to handcraft it for drafts, which is what I've been doing.
Correct. And Obsidian has a templating function as well. It revolutionized my life. Tinderbox revolutionized my life. Obsidian revolutionized my ability to use Tinderbox as an input software. Obsidian is like my collection bucket, and it's just awesome.
Great.
We can have a sideline conversation on it. I don't want to show it all now, but there's like plugins you'll add and all of that. It's got a massive community that's just incredible.
So I should make that shift. I've been putting it off.
Absolutely made it. I made the shift in March, and I'm never looking back ever. And we can have a sign like call and I'll help you out with that. And Tom Diaz is the one that put me on it. He's like, dude, you got to use Obsidian, and I tried, and I've never looked back. Okay, that was great. I'm not gonna, because the list is getting a bit long, so I'm not gonna repeat it, but I captured all of those notes. Thank you for that. Mr. Rogers, you want to chime in? What tools are you using?
I'm just joining, so I'm a little behind.
We're talking about the tools we use to manage our thoughts.
What passes for thoughts? Basically just Tinderbox. I am it's almost faddish, this note-taking app thing. And I read Jack Beatty's blog all the time, and he tries all the different note things. There's a new one out. It reminds Quicksilver or something like that, or Silverlight or something. But yeah, Tinderbox is good enough for me. So I'm retired. I don't think any deep thoughts anymore. I just write blog posts and try and get my Tinderbox to work right.
Yeah, and that's one thing Steve Hart brought up earlier, all these new tools coming up. So how do you know when to jump onto the next shiny object, right?
Yeah, well, knowing when to say no is one of the keys to success in life.
So if you can find a link to that Silverlight tool, that'd be interesting to see it.
Yeah, let me go to Jack's blog, and I'm sure he'll have one there. I'll post it in the chat.
All right. Who else wants to go through their list of tools? Mr. Tom? Haven't seen you in a while. You want to join?
Hey, how are you?
Good.
Good morning, everyone. I primarily use DevonTHINK to store everything. I use drafts to get my initial thoughts down. And then I use Obsidian to go maybe a little further. And then those ideas that I want to curate or grow in the garden or whatever you want to call it, I'll use Tinderbox for those thoughts. And that's generally my process. It's fairly simple, but that's generally how I work through either books or articles or just web stuff that I'm just researching or looking at.
Okay. Awesome. Who's got some other things? Phil, what do you use?
So I use DevonTHINK quite a bit. I've started exploring Obsidian, and then I use Scrivener, at least for first drafts. Because I collaborate a lot, I get forced into Word. And because part of my job is teaching, I live by death by PowerPoint. But one thing that I do that I don't know if it's different, but all of my notes start in a paper notebook.
Ah, there you go. Analog.
I start analog, and then I review those daily, and the stuff that I think is important towards move me toward whatever idea I want to move towards, whether it's a research paper, lecture, proposal, whatever, then moves into Tinderbox.
Okay. Love it. Any other tools to add to the list?
It's kind of the standards everybody else has talked about. Well, R, I use R a lot
Okay.
for data analysis.
Yeah. R, okay.
And that's
Anybody?
about it.
Okay. Capture all the notes here. All right. Who have we got? Erwini, what do you got? What tools do you use? Okay. Bruce Gale, how about you? Bruce, are you on mute, or are you are you trying to conduct the orchestra?
There we go. I'm I'm at a
Oh,
conference and realized I had a free hour. So I'm on my iPhone. So you'll have to forgive me. You're all in landscape mode. I've forgotten how awful Zoom is on an iPhone. Anyway, I think I jumped in late, as you can see. I use drafts a lot. I am, especially with your urging, I am definitely going to check out Obsidian because I run into the same problems with drafts that others have described. I mean, I like it. I like it for its convenience. But I also tend to use, I do a lot in Otter, actually. I will dictate my thoughts in Otter and especially for when I hold meetings, I like the summarization features and the bullet points. I find they're pretty actually surprisingly on target, and so then I'll lift those and move those into Tinderbox, or sometimes frankly just Google Docs will do what I need, especially if I'm collaborating with staff.
okay. All right. Anything else?
No, I don't think so. Just gonna play along and watch.
Okay. Kenneth, you want to join in? Are you in listen mode today, or can you share some tools for that thought? If you're not in a place to speak, maybe you can drop something into the chat. And I guess then that leaves Mr. Peterson. Did you go?
Yeah, just DevonTHINK. Mostly doing analog pencil paper right now for note taking, and I'm trying to synthesize information in my head. So doing a lot of collection and organizing information digitally, I can't synthesize it. So I'm really slowing down, trying to really take notes on paper. Unfortunately, if you do a lot of paper writing analog, it's hard to keep track of where things are at. So that's why I have to figure out how to go back to a digital format to actually to index my information. But yeah, just DevonTHINK in Tinderbox for mind mapping and really trying to figure out how to use Tinderbox to meet my needs. Of course, I use PowerPoint by Death as well, and also there's another presentation tool called IA Presenter. It's a part of the IAA Writer Suite. There's actually a presenter called IA Presenter that's really kind of cool. Really kind of takes and you can export out to PowerPoint as well. But it's really a really clean, a minimalistic type of tool for presenting. So I'm kind of using that as my output, but I'm trying to again curate the information analog. But I need to use Tinderbox a little bit better. Figure out how to use it so I can actually output maybe to make like an IA presenter for presentation wise. But yeah, mostly just DevonTHINK is the indexer for PDFs and probably Tinderbox. Yeah, I use Word, of course, and I'm trying to get into this. Not one last thing here. I'm trying to get into this one tool on my Mac called OmniGraffle. Anybody ever hear about that? OmniGraffle, kind of like a Visio concept where you can actually break things down. I'm trying to learn that tool right now, but that's basically it. I'm really trying to stay into the analog writing thing with notes so I can synthesize a little bit better. They say that you can write things down, you can definitely synthesize and retain information by writing things down. So I bought some fountain pens, and it's interesting lifestyle I got here.
Yeah. Fabulous. Can anybody think of anything else that they're using?
Just a comment back on OmniGraffle. I've used that in the past as well.
Yeah, what do you think about that?
Honestly, I have to say I found it a frustrating tool.
Yeah, exactly.
It does some things, and I've used a whole bunch of engineering design tools of various types, and Canvas back in the day. Then Canvas
Right.
is a totally different app these days. But depending on what you're trying to do, you might think about looking at things like SketchUp or some of the other more design-oriented tools. They've come a
SketchUp,
long way in recent years. So just comment that I think that it's kind of unfortunate, but some of the tools that we used to have that were really oriented toward doing what I would call super PowerPoint, that is really being good at allowing you to draw diagrams and provide an integrated graphical presentation environment. There used to be better tools than I think are available, than I believe are available today. And OmniGraffle was trying to do something that had a lot of merit, but I think just somehow fell up a little bit short. And my sense is it hasn't been all that well supported in recent years.
well, it's not very intuitive, that's for sure. I tell you.
Yeah, it's just got kind of wrapped around its own axles, the way I would describe it.
Well, and it sounds like it's similar to YED, which is the graphing tool that
I can't comment because I know nothing about
I
YED.
know, but it's a similar tool to YED as I looked at it. And so that might be something else to look at. Okay, Frederick, your hand's up. You're on mute. If you're
Thank you. Sorry, I have too many devices. You can hear me now, right? Kim mentioned something interesting, which one of the dreams has been to do stuff analog with pen and paper and yet get the advantage of the digital. And I've been trying that a long time and failing. One of the things was using an iPad and writing in it, and there's some apps that used to let you do free form writing, but it became more trouble than it's worth. And another idea is to write on paper and then feed it through a scanner, which is yet another job. And then I've never bought one, maybe somebody here has, but there were a bunch of products marketed sort of like an iPad. They were PDF readers that let you write on them and supposedly would just make all your problems with collecting notes go away, letting you just write on the screen. I haven't bothered buying those because it's just failed in the past. But there's something to be said for doing analog. It's much quicker and much easier. But then you have a huge mess of paper when you're done, which is another problem. So I think it's worth having has anybody solved the analog digital problem in a meaningful way? I think it's useful.
No. I did try the Remarkable tablet.
That's the one I meant. Yeah.
It's nice to write, but it doesn't export well. And that's the problem. So I've actually gave it to my son and he uses it for his calculus homework and he loves it. So it's like great for that kind of environment, but if you need to get stuff out, it's not.
So it didn't work for you. Okay.
No. Yeah, Phil.
Yeah, so to go back to the scanner idea, I basically just use an app on my phone if there's something that I want to scan and then have it OCR'd. There's a little correction you have to do, but one of the things, one of the reasons to do analog is it slows you down, makes you think. The other thing is that so then when you're trying to correct stuff that you've OCR'd in, that will help you slow you down because you've got to correct it and think about it and revise it. And there's value in that process. I know people want to rush along and I don't want to repeat things, but there's a real value in thinking about those things in that kind of process that you can't get if you just type it in and then look at it later. And I think that's a big loss. I think a lot of people are losing a lot of information just because they type it in, and unless it pops up because of a link or something. Whereas if you think about it and you retain it, you know, I've got notebooks from 20 years ago. I still remember certain things in those notebooks that was really important to me, and I can go back and find them.
Yeah, you remember it's 2/3 into the book on the left-hand
Right.
side. You've got a spatial orientation to your mind.
Right.
Do you have to store all those books? I mean, don't you run out of space, and isn't it a problem eventually to have all this paper everywhere?
Well, so I use something like a Moleskin or, you know, small little notebooks. I've got boxes that I can store them in. Yes, it takes up space. And eventually, you know, I kind of use sort of around the 10-year rule. If a notebook's 10 years or older, I archive it in storage. If it's still around after 2 years and I haven't looked at it, then I'll go ahead and, you know, recycle it or dispose of it. And you know, the tags, flagging things that you can go back at later, but just the process of every day reviewing those notes once or twice. I often find things, oh, I forgot to put that in that paper. And you know, if I see it soon enough, I can go back. So that process we're losing with all the technology.
Yeah. Okay. All right, I guess I can go. So I'll just go down my list in short order. I'm sure I've missed some of them too, as I'm kind of thinking through it. So I use a whole variety of tools, as some may think. So my go-to central tool is Tinderbox. I do let's go back to Roger, Dave, and Bruce first. Dave?
Yeah, it occurred to me after I spoke. Remarkably, the thing I use that maybe not come to mind, and it's mostly as a memory aid, but I capture more and more information with my phone, with my camera, and storing it in photos. The challenge there is to organize stuff into albums, which I'm hoping Apple's machine learning AI thing will facilitate for us. But having that phone available and those photos available with all that metadata, including the geographic position, the date and the time, and so on, has come in handy more often than you might think. And it's always on your person, at least in my case. So yeah, the Photos app, a tool for thought.
Nice. Nice. Okay. All right.
And Michael, to add on to that for a second, same thing. I was going to comment that recently I've been using my phone and the photo library, and that copy image feature. I've been finding it very accurate, and especially if you just crop down to what you want, you can copy it, and then I'll put it directly into. It's usually my phone, and I don't have my computer, so I'm not putting it into Tinderbox, but I'll put it into an intermediary, to get into Tinderbox. But I found that to be a little faster than scanning as a PDF.
And I don't know if it does it in the background or when you're doing it, but if you search for a given for a word in your photos library, it'll find every photo with that word in it. So that's pretty remarkable.
Thank you, Dave,
Yes.
for bringing that up. I also agree that Photos has become a invaluable tool in many things I do these days, including watching my grandson.
Nice. Okay, so I'll go down my list really quick. So my go-to every day on the screen all the time is Tinderbox. The other tools that I use are Zotero for reference management. I use Snagit for image capture, and screen captures, image capturing, that kind of thing. Text Expander constantly as a utility for populating, especially things like when I'm doing includes or wanting to share with people my Calendly link and things like that, so that those common like URLs and snippets of Tinderbox code that I constantly am reusing within context and want it to pre-populate. So Text Expander has this really nice thing of you can, like, if I want to do an include, I can copy the ID name of a note to the clipboard, and then I type a text expander shortcut, and it will take that ID name and paste it right into the include code that I want in a particular note. And so I find that really efficient to work. The other tool that I use every day, all the time, is Text Sniper. And Text Sniper is a fantastic utility for screen grabbing any text off of your screen. So in an image, in an email, in a PowerPoint, or in a conference or whatever, if I'm sitting here and somebody's got something and I want to pull the text out of something that I'm looking at on my screen, Text Sniper is amazing. iTerm as a better terminal. I use that obviously the Office suite, unfortunately, but it is what it is. Huda Spot as a more universal searching. It's a better search utility and tool than the Mac OS search utility. I use a tool called Bartender because I do have so many utilities in my Mac. The screen along the top gets really can get the little icons along the top right screen can get really complicated, filled. And so the Bartender app shorts those, makes those a lot cleaner. I use a utility called iStats menu that lets me keep track of the performance of my computer and what's going on, and making sure that no system or utility is running awry. I've been using SparkMail, but I'm glad that Chuck brought up Thunderbird. So because I don't like it, so I'm hoping that I can move over to Thunderbird or find a better mail client. But I also use MailMate because I find it has a better search function than some of the other Mac mail clients that I like. So if I really do need to find an email, I tend to pop over to MailMate and search within MailMate, because Frederick's not nodding his head. MailMate's the email search is awesome. But as a email authoring client, it's not my favorite, although it's kind of cool because you can actually author in Markdown. Zoom constantly, Stata for statistical research, 1Password for my password management. I've combined 1Password with a utility called Fastmail, which I find is to be the great combination of two really cool utilities. 1Password does your password management. Fastmail lets me create email aliases. So whenever I generate an account or I want to create email aliases when I'm doing my research, I generate an email alias on the fly. So that way, with nearly every company I interact with, every company I interact with, they're getting their own email from me. And then it's all, especially for like I subscribe to hundreds of news lists, and those all dump into my Fastmail account. So that keeps my personal email separate. And the other thing that I found really, really powerful with doing that was Fastmail lets you buy your own domain. So I bought a domain called IDP-EML for Identity Praxis Email. And I associated that with my Fastmail account domain. So that way, if I ever choose to leave Fastmail, I'll own that email domain that I'm giving to everyone. So then that way I can then just redirect that email domain to some other email service. And so I think that's a little thing that I've been learning over time that's really, really important. If and at all possible, own your own domains. And then when you're publishing those domains, then you can move around and you're not beholden to the base utility. Because if I used Fastmail's domain, I'd be stuck in Fastmail, and then it would take me months, if ever, to be able to unwind myself. Well, now I can unwind immediately. So I found that to be really powerful. Chuck, I'll continue my list, but you raised your hand. I want to give you a chance to comment.
Yeah, no, I was just going to comment on what you just said. But having a domain is actually very important if you want to use email in a more integrated fashion. For decades, had my own domain names. So for example, chuck-wade.com is my domain name. And I can put anything I want in front of the @ sign, and that email will come to me.
Right.
Email server. And you may have to go and get an email service provider that's a little more robust than, you know, the Google or other types that people use. And Fastmail may have that kind of service, but in general, if you do that, then you've got the ability to tag email for subscriptions or correspondence by just changing the name that you use on it.
Right.
I'll throw in comments about Thunderbird. Thunderbird will let you create the response email. So when you want to respond using that particular email, if I said, if I wanted to have tenderbox@chuck-wade.com, I could set that up. But then if I wanted to reply to somebody, so they would see that my email address was tenderbox@chuck-wade.com, Tenderbox lets me do that as I create the message, which, not Tenderbox, I meant Thunderbird.
And on that point too, have more, feel free to have more than one domain. So for example, I have a domain for my junk email, like I just explained, and I have another domain for my business email, but a handful of Gmail accounts for my personal crap. But I probably have, 5, 6 domains that I actually use. I own about 20 or 30, but I have 5 or 6 that I actually use consciously, purposefully.
The other thing since you mentioned Thunderbird, I'll just throw out one other thing that people may not be aware of that can be helpful. First of all, there are some, I guess I'd characterize them as forks of Thunderbird. So Postbox on the Mac is another fairly popular email client that is a derivative of Thunderbird.
I mean, which one? I'm sorry, Postbox. Postbox, got it. Okay.
A lot of people like that one. It may be a little bit prettier in some respects. But the other thing that Thunderbird does, and I'm not sure I've seen anything quite to the same extent, but a user-developed extension of Thunderbird many years ago is something called import-export. It is now part of the basic Thunderbird product. So it eventually just got integrated into Thunderbird. What it allows you to do is to take any collection of email that you have and export it as, believe it or not, an HTML file, which maintains all the structure of all of your email messages, as well as the attachments. And that's another thing that, again, I guess I would say is a value for using email as a note-taking facility, is that you can include attachments, whether they be illustrations or documents or just about anything you want. You can have many attachments to a single email. They all get digitally signed if you do that. So again, that increases the record permanence aspect of things. But when you can now take an entire library, an entire set of emails associated with one client, and if you've got that email sorted into folders, you could take that entire bunch associated with all the documents that go with it and put it into a giant HTML file, which can open up with any browser.
That's pretty awesome.
That's another useful facility. In a sense, that's leveraging the structure of email in the same way that you can leverage the XML core document structure that Tinderbox has.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, awesome. Going down my list a little bit more. So in order to manage my domains, I use a domain service, Web Hero. I like them a lot. Use them for 20 years. There's tons of them, GoDaddy and stuff, but I like Web Hero, small group. I also use, I'll call them tools, but I've really learned to appreciate languages. So HTML, Markdown, regex, those languages have been instrumental in transforming my note-taking capabilities. Markdown, I can quickly write the structure that I'll eventually want to have exported into some form of HTML. HTML, because that's the ultimate output and that's the language of the web, and something that we, to be literate, technically literate in today's world, you really need to know basic HTML. And then regex, if we have some time today, I can demonstrate some regex stuff that I've been doing lately. But regex is absolutely become instrumental to me. I'm using it every day for parsing out text and managing text, and it's saving me an enormous number of hours. Python is on my list to learn. Frederick, I'm actually really, really angry at my son because he found a Python course that was offered 90% off, so he got it for 15 bucks. And he's now working his way through this Python course and learning a ton. And I'm angry about it, angry because he didn't tell me. Because I would have taken it with him, but I don't want to spend the 150 bucks. Not that it's a lot of money, but I don't want to. I would have easily done it for 15 and gotten busy and not finished it, but for 150, I'll have to find the time to actually finish it. So Python's definitely on my list of a language I want to learn. As noted, Obsidian is a tool I use every day, all day, as much as, if not, I don't want to say more, because I use Obsidian and Tinderbox alongside each other all day long, every day. Word, PowerPoint, so the Microsoft Office. Again, I only use them for output. And like Chuck, I am increasingly doing more and more of my the only time I ever used Excel anymore for the pure purpose of Excel is when I need to do some funky calculation formulas that I don't have time to program in Tinderbox. But other than that, I will do nearly all of my Excel work in Tinderbox now, because I can perform nearly every calculation and every tabulation that I need in Tinderbox, and then once it's there, I can turn that Excel file into a PowerPoint. I can turn it into a linear Word document. I can turn it into an Excel file. It's just anything. Yeah, it's just I do nearly all my Excel work in Tinderbox now, I guess is what I need to say. And because of the posters feature, I can now actually get all the graph work that I once used to do in Excel now in Tinderbox. Using different graphing utilities. Chuck, you were coming off of mute. I think you wanted to jump on that.
Shout out to Mark Bernstein for introducing the tables feature in Tinderbox, because making that
and again, if you think about it, Tinderbox Excel is so heavy for basic things like the tables feature. Tinderbox just does it easily. It's just super helpful. Other tools that I use on a near daily basis are BB Edit, obviously my WhatsApp and communication tools. I've got increasingly doing more and more with Readwise. Really am liking it. Although it did break my Tinderbox file the other day, and I can explain that, and it was relatively easy to fix. But I get a daily, so when I highlight, Readwise has a fantastic browser plugin. So what I'm doing is I can highlight what I'm reading on the web, which then gets dumped into Readwise, which I now can pull into Tinderbox through the Readwise plugin, through the Readwise interface that Mark's built into Tinderbox once that gets fixed. Otherwise, Readwise sends me a daily email of about 15 to 20 things that I've been highlighting over the last few weeks or 2 weeks, just to kind of curate and remind me of things. And so I find the Readwise experience really an important part of my knowledge curation methodology now. I use Canva constantly. So in addition to my Snagit for image management, I'll use Canva for image management. Huge user of ChatGPT and Custom GPT. ChatGPT for my research, Custom GPT for making my own digital twin. And so one of my personal projects that I'm working on this summer right now is uploading all of my writing, my books, my articles, the information I'm working on, my doctoral dissertation into Custom GPT, such that it will then become my digital twin, and people can scan a QR code and say, basically ask Michael Becker what he knows. And Custom GPT, then people can have a conversation with my Custom GPT. So I'm toying with that this summer, and it actually is pretty interesting. It works well. I use search a lot in Google and Chrome, but I'm finding I'm increasingly doing more and more search through ChatGPT than I am through Google, and I'm getting better results out of that. And then I'm going to more and more academically focused search engines. So Litmaps, Semantic Scholar, SSRN, ResearchGate. One thing I've learned a lot is I think people discount the importance of academic research in business. You know, just to get a sense of what people are doing and what they're thinking and spending time in the references. I find I get a lot of value with that kind of work. I don't really use highlights that much anymore. I don't do a lot of PDF reading. You know, all right, if I do, I'll do it through DevonTHINK. And I don't like DevonTHINK's highlighting utility. So if I start highlighting a lot of PDF work, I will pop over to the Highlights app or Skim and highlight in those PDFs using that utility, and then bring it back in. Been using Figma a lot. That's another great designing like tool for doing mind mapping and different kinds of work. Spotify just to keep my music interests up. FileZilla for doing file sharing between my apps. Another really important app that I found is SetApp. If nobody here is using SetApp, I highly encourage you to use it. For $9.99 a month, you can have subscribed to hundreds of Mac utilities like Clean My Mac, which is normally $50 a year, and Bartender, which is like 25 or $30, or Text Expander, which has its own price. So I'm finding myself getting hundreds of dollars worth of Mac OS utility software for the subscription of $9.99 a month. So SetApp is just awesome. I use the Adobe Suite when I need it. Use Bitdefender for my VPN and security controls. I use Box and any number of the different Dropbox as well for my file sharing utilities when I need WeTransfer sometimes. When I'm needing to work with people, Camtasia for video editing, for low-end video editing, and Vimeo or Adobe Premiere for high-end video editing. Occasionally use Hook. And one of the most important pieces of software I have that I rarely think about is Arc, ARQ. And Arc is my backup software for my Mac. And I freaking love it. And invariably, at least once a month, I will do something that will screw something up, and I pop over to my Arc file and can re-download it, and it's there. And so at any given moment, unless I'm not connected to the internet, the worst case scenario, I could lose an hour's worth of work. Other than that, I never lose anything anymore. Arc is just a godsend. So that's kind of my suite of tools. And going back to your point, Steve, about which tools do you use, I find the tool that's best for the job and use it. One of the things that helped me get my dissertation done actually was in March, when I had to make the conscious choice that Tinderbox was no longer serving me, and I had to leave it for the next 2 or 3 months. Text Expander is on my list too, Kim. I use that all the time. I put that on the top of the list. But that was really hard for me, and it was actually a powerful learning lesson too, in that I'd spent the last 4 years investing in all of my energy and effort in learning Tinderbox, building Tinderbox, getting to a point where my dissertation could be done. And then I had to leave Tinderbox behind because I had to go to Microsoft Word because that's what my committee was using. And I had to leave the tool behind because the tool wouldn't, and I spent like a month trying to keep my Tinderbox file and the Microsoft Words file in sync. And then finally I just had to give up because that was just taking too much effort. So then I spent the last 2.5 months of my dissertation purely working in Word. And now this summer, I'm going back and pulling the final Word stuff back into a Tinderbox environment that I can do research in. And then the beautiful learning about that is I'm now learning then the whole, again, the re-experiencing the just incredible value of Tinderbox, because I can pull tables out of Microsoft Word, drop them into a Tinderbox file, and then use Explode or screen parsing or any of the other text operators within Tinderbox to allow me to deconstruct all of that hard-coded word structure and break everything back into attributes and break it, and so that then my content becomes pure and independent of its structure and appearance. And so going back and forth with that, and that's why when I say I go back to becoming really comfortable with these languages like HTML and regex and Markdown, understanding, like, especially like regex, having regex to deconstruct crap that's coming out of Microsoft Word and Excel is just incredibly powerful. And so those are some of the tools and utilities that I've been using as well. So it's a long list, and the reality is it's taken me a long time to learn them and to cobble them together, and now it's become muscle memory, and they're just there, and it actually now takes effort to think about them as opposed to just using them, because they're just now part of the muscle memory and I use them. And that's the other thing I think I learned from Paul Walters was hotkeys, and from Tom Diaz. I've taken the effort to learn in the Mac OS, like shortcuts, application shortcut hotkeys. So I've programmed if I find I'm using a menu in an application more than 2 or 3 times, I create a hotkey for it, and then that hotkey becomes muscle memory. And so like my explode right now is Option Command E when I want to explode a note in Tinderbox, and I just do that, and I do it so often it's just muscle memory, and now it works, and it's that capability is always there. So as I'm using this more and more, the tools are receding into the background, and the content and text is becoming more present and is part of my daily life and daily work. But that takes conscious, presence-based focus to make that happen. So that's my list, and I'm sure I've got others that I left, but that's my general list. Any other thoughts, comments, ideas?
Why do you use Snagit instead of the default?
Oh, great. Snagit's got much better hotkey management. Snagit's got a better file management utility. Snagit has other utilities like magnifier. It's got some templating utilities. I find it easier to, it's got a better interface. So I'm not just trying to capture the image. I'm trying to capture and archive the image. And capture and archive and tweak the image. And again, Snagit is a collection utility for me. So I'll much like you, I use Snagit as much as I use Photos for that general image collection repository of stuff. And then once I find an image that I'm going to reproduce, and this is another thing I use as well. I use Apple's OS's file manager, right? I have I have a strategy for my images. So it's not just the tools themselves. I also have strategies for them. Like most of my general images get dumped into a folder called articles, right? Because you all know I don't paste images into my Tinderbox files because I like to keep them independent assets. So so I know, and this is part of the muscle memory, I know the vast majority of my images are in a folder called articles, and if they're not, they're in a folder called people for like people pictures, or they're in a folder called logos, or they're in a project folder. And then based on that, I can then say, I have Tinderbox have the default. Any images can be, so when I work with images in Tinderbox, all I need is the image file name, because Tinderbox already has the path defaulted. And if I'm working in a particular project, the path and the directory are attributes for me in my file path. So when I tell Tinderbox, go get that image, if I'm working in a particular subfolder of a project in a Tinderbox file, that subfolder will tell all of its children notes, well, the images for this file are in this path, and then the only other attribute I need to change is the directory, if anything. And so this idea of having understanding file pathing, the file path access, and what does a path mean within the Mac OS, was really kind of revolutionary for me as well. So I guess part of what I've learned in this process is I'm able to let the tools start receding into the background because I'm increasingly knowing how the tools actually work. Like I know how they're managing, how they're accessing files on the computer, how regular expression works, how HTML and CSS work. That's another language, CSS works. So, and then you have the Tinderbox action code as well, I guess is another language. But understanding and then and the beautiful thing about Tinderbox is it's all based on industry standard coding methodologies. So Tinderbox action code is a lot like JavaScript, is a lot like Python. It's a lot like Perl. I mean, it's similar stuff, So as I'm finding, and that's why I'm willing to invest so much time in Tinderbox, because when I'm investing time in Tinderbox, I'm learning industry standard language. I'm learning HTML, I'm learning CSS, I'm learning regex, I'm learning XML, I'm learning file path management. And that saves an enormous amount of time, because once you get those fundamental skills, you can start going to any app and say, okay, I generally know how this works. I generally know how to manipulate that stuff. And I'm finding that really useful. So Tinderbox has taught me like computing fundamentals that I didn't realize that I could actually get, which is pretty darn exciting. Dave Rogers, your hands up.
Yeah, not exactly a tool for thought, but a lot of these are like utilities that we use to facilitate our larger projects. FastScripts is a tremendous utility to use AppleScript to integrate actions across applications. I post photos to my blog in Tinderbox through a script that goes out to the photos, grabs the photo, imports the relevant metadata that I want for the post into that Tinderbox note. And you can assign a hotkey to that. Any script you want, you can assign a hotkey to. But FastScripts can't speak highly enough of it. And I just thought of another one. I was trying to keep, and I just have stopped doing it recently. My local copy of my blog on my iMac synced with a removable thumb drive, and I use a Unix geek could probably do it just through the shell. But there's a little app called SyncTime in the App Store that will handle all that in the background for you, and keeps your folders all in sync, so that if I needed to go someplace and bring a current copy of the Marmot with me, all I had to do was eject that drive and stick it in my pocket, and we're good to go. But
and I think that an important insight there is the distinction between a tool and a utility. So for me, a utility is a tool. Text Sniper is as much a tool as any other tool, but as a utility, it does one thing really, really well: capture text on a screen. Versus what we tend to think of tools, which would be like the Swiss Army knife with multiple capabilities. Chuck, you were going to say?
I was going to say, Dave, did you mean Syncthing, or is it really SyncTime?
it's SyncTime. I just put a link in it to the App Store.
Because Syncthing is another cross-platform tool that we use. It's been around for ages.
Yeah, I was looking at making up my own fix through the shell, but too many opportunities to screw something up. And SyncTime got good reviews. I think all SyncTime does is talk to the Unix layer.
And what does Syncthing do? I just got the URL, just dropped that in. What does that do?
Syncthing is a file syncing utility. It allows you to set up folders that can be synced across, from one system to another, locally or across the net, or to a file server, or wherever you want to have these things reside. And it just keeps them up to date. You can implement controls that say, this is always the master, this site is always the master, and things like that.
Okay.
It's fairly elaborate. It takes a little bit of time to get familiar with it and set it up. But if you need to synchronize across multiple systems, it's kind of invaluable. If you have to synchronize between a Mac and a Windows system, you can do it.
Nice. Okay. And then we have about 6 minutes left, and I always get a little antsy being in our Tinderbox call and not actually showing some fun Tinderbox stuff. So we can keep this can wrap this conversation up on tools, or we can keep going. Or if you want, I can show you in like 5 to 10 minutes or less a cool little Tinderbox thingy I figured out this week, which was pretty awesome. If you guys want to take a peek at that, I'd happily share. But I'm going to get some nods of heads or thumbs up before.
Oh yeah, that would be great.
All right. So let me and we can go about maybe 15 minutes long, because we can also show what the problem that Frederick was having earlier, which I think is a good little tweak demonstration to show. So so I'm as you all know, I'm working on my textbook efforts with my co-author Mary Beth. And part of what we need to do in the textbook is we need to create a glossary of terms, and we need to create a the references that we're using within the Tinderbox. So there's two strategies that I'm doing with that. So let's say I am, and this is going to be a discussion of the what, not the how, because we don't have any time for me to really show you the how. And I've shown you some of this before. So here I'm writing about a concept called unstructured supplementary service data, or USSD messaging, that's possible in areas like sub-Saharan Africa. And you'll notice as I'm doing my writing, I am including some references, in that writing. And I'm also and I also need to be creating my glossary of terms. So in this particular piece right here, I'm talking about consumer packaged goods, protocols, real-time communication, server-based communication, USSD, etc. So I have, and again, you've all seen me do this before, but when I type, I've got scripts. So when I type values into this attribute, I have Tinderbox automatically creating the notes that are related to that attribute, which then allows me to pull off the tag. I can define the term, close the window, go back to my work. And so there's actually another note. And if I want to click on that, I'll just jump there and you'll see I've got the terms that are being created by my file as we speak there. So now if I go back to the note here, what that allows me to do is, so I type in the terms I want. Tinderbox creates the term notes for me. It links those notes to this particular note, which allows in the future for me to be able to create indexes. But what it also allows me to do is this, which is really cool. So if I go here to glossary, and so I've set up an agent that says my set agent dot contains name. And this is really, really powerful. And let me show you what's happening with the agent. So what the iSent agent designator means. So if in my edict for this agent, I'm saying make my ID project the ID number of the parent. So the agent is sitting inside, the glossary is sitting inside chapter 4. And so its parent is chapter 4. So I'm saying, go get me the ID number for chapter 4, for this chapter. And again, by abstracting this out into attributes, I can copy this glossary to other chapters. And then the functionality just works within the confines of that container called the chapter. So get me the ID number for the chapter. Then what I want you to do is create a variable. I want you to clear out the term list so there's no extra chaff in there. And then I want you to say, go and collect all of the information that are descendants of VID, which is essentially the note of chapter 4, of the note that is that ID. So go collect all of the notes of that note, and go grab and make sure it's not an alias, because I don't want to collect aliases, and I don't want to collect the terms that are in the agent. And go grab the terms. So what this is doing is it's going through every note in chapter 4. Whether or not there's 2 notes or 2,000 notes, doesn't matter. Goes through every note in chapter 4 and grabs all of the notes that have terms in them, and then populates those, and then it adds in the term prefix, because you all know I use prefixes when I'm managing my notes, so I can make distinctions between notes that have similar names but different contexts. So that then creates this my set here. So now I've got a set of terms, term-CPG, term-consumer packaged goods, term-protocol in the note. So then what the agent's going to do is it's going to say, in my set, and this is how you designate a designator. So what I'm telling the agent query to do is saying, look at all the values in the agent's my set, and then do a dot contains name. And so what this agent query is essentially saying is, go find me all of the notes that have that include the name of the items that are in my set. And so that then tells the agent to go find all of those terms. So what this means is here are the 9 terms that I've currently referenced in this chapter as I'm drafting it. So that allows me to then to know what terms I've used in this chapter. I then can apply a template, and I now have my, when I export out my file, I now have my glossary of terms. So this is a way for me to create a glossary of terms, or and you can do similar. It can be a glossary of terms. It can be an index of images. This same methodology can be used in any number of different ways. In that same vein, I took a reference file, and this is where the regex comes into play. And so I said, go get me the project name, clear out the string, go collect all of the citation keys. So the exact same functionality that I was doing before. Go grab all the citation keys, create a set for those citations. And then this is a little different, because what I want to do now is I want to be able to create a reference list at the end of the chapter. And so this is where I'm now going to leverage Pandoc, which, by the way, was another tool I didn't bring up that I use nearly every day. And I'm saying wrap the output of this variable, this v-string variable that I've just created, with the HTML of display none, the span HTML of display none. So what that's doing is it's going through, looking at every item within this note. And again, this is a new chapter. I'm just starting the draft, so that not a lot of references in it. It's grabbing those references. It's sticking those references in the into the note, and it's hiding them with the hide span column. So when that note actually renders, I'm having Pandoc produce my references for the document, but the HTML is hiding them, so they're not actually showing up in the document. So this is a great way of having Tinderbox automate something which would take typically take an editor an enormous amount of extra work. Like, so if you were producing a glossary of terms for a book or a chapter or an article, the editor would be having to compare and contrast. Are we sure that this, because often when you're writing a book, you'll throw stuff in the glossary and you'll forget that as you were editing, you removed that term, or you changed it. Whereas now the glossary is guaranteed to only be the terms that I consciously chose to include in the book. And if I want to remove it, I just remove it. And it removes everywhere everywhere. Likewise, the same thing. The references will automatically I'm guaranteed to have the references, only have the references that are in actually being used and referenced in the work. And so this, and then to the point of slide work, I'm actually in the process of creating my PowerPoint slides, my lecture slides for this chapter at the same time while I'm writing the chapter. Here are the bullets that I want to use. Here are the figures that I want to use, and things like that. And then I can use Pandoc to export that into a PowerPoint file. So that just kind of gives you the power of enabling and doing that. And so one important thing to look at that's happening behind the scenes here is, if you go down to, and I've talked about this before, if you go to my on visit code for my page, I have, and I just wrote this yesterday as I was thinking this through. I wrote this line item right here. Citation key equals equals text.extract at brackets, grab me every character not. So this is an example of regex, and this is essentially saying, go look at when you're on a page, go look at the text and grab everything that starts with an @ sign that is within brackets, but don't capture the brackets. Don't ignore the bracket. And so then what's happening then, and I'll show, and then I'll shut up, and we can explain the hows a little bit more later. But what's happening there when you see that, and these are all, and here's an example of all of the images that I have associated with the book, and I can give you that demo in just a second. So if I go down here and I show you this introduction, where's the one that's got, I think it's this one, yeah. So because I have that on visit code running in the background as a on stamp, and I don't run it as a rule or an edict, because I really only need that to update once I visit a note. and then it runs. I don't need it constantly running in the background all the time because I have 20,000 notes in here. So that would slow the system down. So I have stamped this note with the on visit p page code whenever I visit it, which would then go run that script. And what one of the things that script does is pull out all of the references and populates citation key. And then I have the other rules that are running for the references and the citation management. So this is how these little pieces are starting to come together. And it's really, really cool. And then finally, I'll show you this. You know, when you're talking unstructured data, and this is the example of what I was saying earlier about using Text Expander and showing how these different tools come together. So you see these notes here. What's interesting here is I've chosen, and this is another kind of knowing how computers work, knowing what I might want to do in the future. You'll see here how it says figure and then a number. Well, what is that number? Well, let me scroll all the way down and I'll show you what that number is. That number is a is the ID number of this note. And so I have some script running. So the display expression for this note is essentially saying, okay, that's it's on an on stamp. The display expression is essentially saying, make the display, what I'm viewing on the screen, the caption that I will be using for the note. But the note name is actually its ID number. And so I've got some other codes too. For these images, it's always making all these note names the ID number. So all I need to do is grab that ID number. So I'm going to copy that ID number because that's a number that I want to include in a particular file. And let's say I want to go up here and include that here. And because I'm using Text Expander, that image number is on the clipboard. And so in Text Expander, I've created a hotkey called fig include. So if I type the word, include fig, and it automatically creates that insert. And in this case, I forgot that I didn't put that in the fig there. So it automatically will include the file number for me. So then when I go to render the image, my templates are now displaying the images. So this is a way that I've created some automation that and some workflow for me that's allowed me to manage my images, have my images as assets, be able to bring them into my work. Part of the reason why I'm using file numbers and not the caption label of the note is I'm finding that invariably as I'm writing, I change the name of the caption of the note. I'll change the name of the caption label. Like, oh, I don't want to call that image USSD this. Well, if I were to actually use the name of the note, then this include would break because the name of the note changed, whereas the ID number never changes. And so that way I can be changing the label that I use to label that note. And the include doesn't break. The other thing I'm going to have to figure out too is I'll run some scripts for this is the auto numbering, and having the ID number will allow me to index the order to which these ID numbers show up in the document, and then I'll be able to use that order to produce the auto figure numbering. But I haven't gotten around to doing that. And then finally, I'll conclude with this. Because I've learned to trust the process, I've learned to trust the workflow, because I've learned to trust Tinderbox and the community of tools to which we've just been talking about. Because I trust the 5 C's of knowledge management. When I'm collecting, I can now focus on collection. When I'm curating, I can focus on curation. When I'm creating, I can focus on creating. When I'm collaborating, I can collaborate. When I output, I can output. I'm not worrying about the contribution part, the output right now, because I trust the tools and I know when I need to get around to auto numbering these figures, I can spend a couple hours or half a day that it will take me to do that. And so I'm not worried about that right now at this stage. At this stage, I'm on the collection, curation, and creation stage. I'm not in the output stage, so I'll deal with output later. And because I've learned to trust the tools, that anxiety level goes way down. In this creation process. So those are some of the little tinderboxy things that I've figured out how to play with this week. And if you want, Frederick, we can stay over an extra 5 minutes, and I'll walk you through the demo I did on the on the explode. So one of the things, let me here pull this up. So Frederick had a question. I'm just opening the file. So while I'm opening up this other file, does anybody have, let me stop sharing screen real quick. Does anybody have any comments or questions about what I just went over? We can do the how later, but
yeah, it's great.
Yeah, but that makes sense.
It's amazing how much time one can spend even on a journal article trying to get references and things like that right. It's really annoying. So this is great.
Yeah, and here's the thing. People ask me, why do you spend so much time with Tinderbox? Well, because now that I've learned how to manage references, I don't have to waste that. What I learned in PowerPoint is if I did it once, I'd have to do it again and again and again and again and again. And that's it just you want to kill yourself, right? Whereas with Tinderbox, you do it once, it hurt. You may have to do it again to tweak it for context, but by the third time, you never need to touch it again. It just works, right? And then and invariably, it saves you so much time down the road. So so here is the where is the demo? So here is the, did I delete it? I might have deleted it. So okay, so let's do this. So let's say we had, oops. Let's say we had so this was Frederick's question and a quick little demo. So I'm going to have a note here. So let's say for whatever reason, I had some information and I had this. I first name, last name, and let's go ahead for sake of ease for this demo. I had, and this could have come from an Excel file. This could have come from something you copied on the web. And you have basically what you want to do is you want to explode these elements into their own notes. And so essentially you want a note that is somebody's first name, and you want a note that is, oh, let me do this one. Company one. So let's say you want a note that is first name, you want a note that is company two. So there's a lot of ways to do this, but let's say you had this. You had some raw material, and you had somebody's first name and you had their company, you had their second name and you had their company, and you essentially wanted to now parse this up, have individual notes for both the company and the individual, and you wanted to link them. So there's a variety of approaches that you could go about doing this. You could use the explode function, or you could use the the dot each line string parser. Honestly, the dot line string parser might be easier, but because we have limited time and we just want to show the explode function, we'll do this really quick. So one thing we'll do is we'll initially go ahead and explode those notes at the line breaks. And so I went to explode and I said explode at paragraph marks. And then that gave me an individual note for each of the different notes. And so then if I wanted to, if I was just doing this quick, I then could go ahead and say, now I want you to explode the notes at the comma and the paragraph. And then that gives me now two notes at the comma and the paragraph. And then I could go ahead and perform that same function very quickly for each of these notes. Okay. And you see, I've got ahead and done that. Okay. So that's one way to go about doing it. And then what you could quickly do is grab all of the people notes. And so let's go ahead and create a folder called people. And we'll just quickly go ahead and grab the people notes. And then you can just drag them in. like that. And so I've got my people notes. And I think I missed number 4. And so why I say there's easier ways to automate this, but you know, the exploding note function. So that's one way to do it. And then similarly, we can go ahead and grab company notes. I'll go ahead and delete this now since we got it right. And I'll grab the company notes. And you know, I could have done a move function or any number of different things, but you know, within a matter of minutes, we were able to quickly parse that list into a list of first names and last names. Okay, so then what we can do is we can then, let's say we want to apply the people note, and let's see how I did this. I can't remember how I did it. Did I put it in as a rule or a stamp? I think I did it as a stamp, if I remember properly. Okay, yeah, so I created a stamp. So let's go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and just for fun, I'll apply the people prototype. So now I've got these 5 people. And oh, the one thing I didn't do is I didn't populate their attribute. So let me go ahead and do this manually so that I could have created some automation, which I did in the other demo for Frederick. But let's say you did properly put this in the note. So essentially now what I've done using any number of the different Tinderbox operators, I was able to parse the name of the person and their company into their respective notes. So now that I've done that, if I go to the stamp that I created, link to organization person. So if I apply this stamp to the note, it's going to look at the name. And so what this is saying is, well, what is organization? It's company 5. What is the link to syntax doing? It's saying link to the note named company 5 and give it the link type person. So when I apply that, you'll all of a sudden see company 5 just got a little arrow right there. Person 5 just got a little arrow right there. And if you look down in the link, there it is. It's linked. So that, and then and you asked about directionality too, Frederick. So it's Tinderbox gives you that directionality automatically. And for me, this is where the mental constructs come into play, right? I want people going into companies because people go into a company. So I use the link to, I want the person linking to the company. So therefore the outbound link from the person is inbound to the company. The inbound link to the person is to the company is to the person. So you want to be mentally too, you want to be thinking about and using the directionality of the linking to your mental advantage. And so then you can automate that. So if I do all that to all of them, then all of a sudden all of those companies now have their links. And that one didn't work because I think I spelled the name wrong. Oh yeah, and there isn't a company 4. Right, that one didn't work because I didn't spell. Oh, company 1 and company 4. There you go. Reverse it. That's what happened. So then if I do that, now it's linked. Here's the first name, last name. So here, person, people, company 4. Right. So that's how link to works.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And then that fits right in with what you did in the tutorial. That's great.
You know, and just to demonstrate how that can be more complex, if I go to my book work, here's my, open up this file again. To demonstrate how that more complex aspect of that, as I demonstrated before, if I go here, and I show you my stamps, right? So like if you look at my stamps, I've got a function I call link to. And so these are all variables that I'm passing from the note to the function. So when this line runs, it's saying pass the values of term index from the resource, pass the container resources folder, terms folder, pass the prototype term pass the term prefix, pass the link name I want to use, and the directionality of the link. So I'm basically telling Tinderbox what I want, what values I want it passing to the function. And then if you go look at the function, what that function's doing is it's basically automatically on the fly creating a dictionary, parsing up those values, and then just doing exactly what we just demonstrated. It's it's basically, this is the effort of creating the note. So if that note doesn't exist, if Tinderbox doesn't find a note anywhere with the name of that note that I just passed, it creates it. And the reason why I pass the container like resource folder or terms folder is it will put it in the right place. So if that term doesn't exist in the terms resources terms folder, Tinderbox with this code here creates it. And with this code, you'll see the link to, links to or from, and that directionality that I passed. Do I, as I said, in the code above, I was saying the directionality to or from. So I'm telling the script on that particular context to either send it to or from. And that's how that works. And there's other ways to manage or do that. Let me show you. I think it's on this one, not that one. Yeah, up here, up for this one. I'm saying I use Tinderbox so I can paste somebody's email address into an attribute. And what this script is doing actually is it's grabbing the string person, going to the people folder, doing all that variables, but it's basically what this code is doing is it's parsing an email address. So you know how in MacMail, when you're in MacMail and you copy somebody's email and it says their name and then the carets and then the email address? Well, I've got regex that parses that apart. And so when I paste somebody's email address in that, Tinderbox automatically creates me a note with that person's name and then takes the regex, grabs the email between those two carets, and then populates their email field with that email. And so then I can then be using Tinderbox to email people. So email is actually, Tinderbox has become for projects, it's become my primary store where I initiate emails to people. So that's how that's how these pieces are starting to come together. And so that's why this demonstrates to you how linked to can be used in a little bit more complex way.
Wow, thank you. Yeah, I think a lot of it is your management of where you keep stuff and how you've organized it there in that script.
Yeah, and that goes back to our discussion of tools. Right. You've got to use the tool's just a tool. You've got to tell it what you want it to do. And what we're doing is we're in the business of managing knowledge. And what is knowledge? Knowledge is attributes. What are attributes? Attributes is information. What is information? It could be a piece of text. It could be an image file that's sitting on the hard drive somewhere. It could be a PDF file that's sitting in DevonTHINK. It could be a video or an audio file. And that's all this Tinderbox world is the parsing and deconstructing and moving around of information to get it in the right place at the time of need.
Wow, thank you.
Yeah, hopefully this is helpful.
Now I have to digest more.
Awesome. All righty. We're a little over. Thanks, everybody. That was fun.
Thank
And
you.
I'll catch you all later. Bye.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Thank you very much.